This week we talk about Parashat Toldot. This is actually the story of Esau, Jacob, and their father Isaac. Now there's a word, an English word, that you really only come across when you start studying religious texts, and that word is hagiography. Hagiography. Now what it means is, it's the Greek for holy writing. Now it doesn't refer to just any writing that's considered holy by anybody. It's actually the word that refers to texts where things or people or moments are just exaggerated beyond all proportion, right? And we actually find that in this parasha when we come to a certain group of Jewish texts called the Midrash. Now the Midrash, they're the texts that describe Jacob as having absolutely never lied ever once in his life. Jacob's this holy man, wonderful guy, and Esau becomes this evil, terrible, horrible person. Ishmael in that book is described as a murderer. It's crazy stuff. But the Bible, thank God, isn't a hagiography. It actually describes these characters not as wild, imaginative things, but actually describes them as people. And that's where I actually love one particular rabbi, a guy called the Rashbam. The Rashbam had a principle for understanding the Bible, and he called it Omek Pshuto Shel Mikra, which means the depth of the simple meaning of the Bible. And that's what we're going to have to look at in order to be able to understand what's going on. There's one particular passage that really comes out to me as showing me that this isn't a hagiography. And it's the moment that Esau comes in and realizes there with his dad that Jacob not only stole his birthright, but also stole the blessing. And it says in the scripture that he was trembling, shaking with pain and with suffering. This is a man in absolute pain and suffering. Everything's been taken from him. And his father Isaac standing there, blind, can't even see his son to hold him, to grab him, to comfort him. It's an incredibly real and emotional moment. But when we read moments like this, we have to ask ourselves, God, why did you choose Jacob over Esau? Jacob goes off and lies. Esau here is in pain and suffering. Why choose Jacob over Esau? And this is where another rabbi, a more modern rabbi, a guy called Rabbi Sachs, actually helps us come to some better kind of understanding. Because if you look at the life of Esau, he's a hunter. He's a man of nature. He's a man of the world. He goes off and marries into the Hittite tribe. He's a guy who sort of sees the world around him and deals with it, but has a very, what we would call, materialist worldview. Now, I don't mean he's materialistic. He likes going shopping. I mean that he looks at the world just as it is, doesn't see God's involvement really, doesn't perceive the divine at all. He just thinks of it as, this is what there is. And that's why I think he's left in pain and suffering. Because when you look at Jacob and you look at the story of our people throughout history, we're a tiny people, flawed people who God helps through by his grace. And that, I think, is the message of this parasha. Everyone in this parasha really needs God. In fact, everybody in the world really needs God. And those of us that choose to just stick with the sort of atheistic, materialist worldview end up just like Esau, in pain and suffering, desperately crying out, wanting to understand why the world is the way it is. But if you turn to Messiah, if you turn to grace, if you turn to the unconditional love of a father, not Isaac, but our Father in heaven, I think you actually find something much more special that'll see you through every single moment because he's there with you. That's Parashat Toldot. Okay.
So, Yoel, tell me about this parasha, or this weekly portion, Toldot.
Yeah.
You talked about pain and suffering. Many people think that if you come to God or if you come to Yeshua, you're not going to suffer. All your pain will be taken away and everything will be great. Life will be amazing. But that's not necessarily the case. And you talked about grace as well. So how does that work together?
Yeah, it's interesting. Some people will actually talk about Jesus as if that's exactly what he's going to do.
Yeah.
Can't believe in Jesus, everything will be fine. But I think what I find in Jesus is a place where he's actually identifying with my suffering. I know that if I'm going through a tough time, God went through a tough time, Jesus went through a tough time, and so I feel not alone in those moments as you can do without him.
Yeah. So we have a God that understands our suffering, that became human to be able to not only reveal himself to us, but also to understand and be with us in our suffering.
And completely identify with us.
Right. So grace isn't necessarily not feeling pain. So I guess we can imagine a life of pain without grace and pain with grace.
Absolutely.
But also
pain is unavoidable.
Also a life with hope, Jeff.
Yeah.
I feel like that's something that Jesus does give.
Absolutely.
And I cling on to that hope with all my heart. And I know, and it motivates me.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful thing as well. And it's a beautiful story.
It is.
And in those times of like suffering over like loss of money, loss of family, loss
of health.
Yeah. Hope, right?
We have hope.
So that's beautiful. Thank you so much, Yoel, for sharing
Thank you,
that
guys.
amazing, beautiful parasha. If you guys liked and enjoyed this video, don't forget to like
Comment
and
Subscribe.
and share the video.
to everybody you know.
We love you
God
all.
bless you guys.
God bless you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.